Yeah.
Let's move on to envisioning the dystopian nightmare that is before us. So one thing that terrifies me, AI. A year ago, I was making these goofy pictures of Nancy Pelosi using Stable Diffusion, and they don't look like a human. They look like grotesque paintings.
Yeah.
Today, they look real.
Yes.
1 year later, people have now begun to AI generate videos.
Yes.
And of characters. We're getting to the point where we're a few years out.
Last time we were on, we did the voices.
We AI generated voices.
That's
of
right.
you
You
name
did
it.
Joe Rogan, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's some voices are harder to do than others. Joe was
They couldn't do your voice, right?
Yeah, it struggled with me. It struggles with a few other people. It doesn't. Luke, Seamus, and I. It didn't get very well. But for some reason, it just nails people like Mitch McConnell or Joe Rogan.
Well, they're large language models, so there's probably more material to pull from for the people that are on the mic more often.
Well, no. This AI, you upload a 30-second audio file.
Okay.
And then it will turn that. It will take that sound, and then
just
you can,
from that one clip.
Yep. And then you
it's
can.
It's not an LLM, in other words.
Right.
Oh, okay.
So, I'm just making a general point about technological advancement. The big thing now that everyone's talking about artificial wombs, and I believe for the time being, let me pause. Through science, we can probably do anything within the confines of the physical world, right? Obviously, I don't think we're going to alter physics using technology. I don't think it's possible. But for the time being, the idea that a biological male, could be given a womb and then give birth is not possible. But there is a possibility in implanting a womb in a man and then having a C-section. And so this is what's actually one of the big debates now with womb transplants for logical reasons, right? They start this because there are women who have damaged or injured their uterus and receive a donor uterus so that they can carry a child.
Yes.
And now the discussion is, okay, well, we did that for an obvious and logical reason to help someone who is injured. Now we can put a womb in anyone for any reason.
Yes.
Yeah. This is how it always starts with a very sympathetic, understandable case, and it ends up with purchasing, buying, selling, discarding, and shipping children. That's what it's going to end up as. And actually, I don't know if children will survive. So they have had some live births from uterus transplant from woman to woman. They've had about a dozen or so across the world where kids have been born through this. It's a very difficult surgery. The UK just announced a month ago that they did it for the first time successfully in women. It was a sister donating to her sister or whatever, right? So it begins with this sympathetic case. And we don't yet have the technology to transplant a womb into a man. I was talking to somebody yesterday who was like, I don't know if you could survive. I mean, like, it's not just a bag. Like, women's brains, their bodies, their hormone levels, right? All of that goes into sustaining a child. It's like it has to connect from something into something else. And those somethings don't exist in men. So really, it would just be a bag in a cavity that would be sitting there in the man. You would still have to create the baby in a laboratory, gestate them probably for a certain amount of time, and then transition it to the bag.
Which they're doing.
Transition it to the bag and then C-section it out because there's no exit. Their pelvis literally cannot support an exit at that point. So I don't know if babies will be able to survive in a male transplant, but I actually think that that's not the greatest threat. I think artificial wombs are the more likely scenario that is going to threaten children sooner, because you do have, the prototype that was developed. They had a lamb that was gestated, right, to virtual maturity, and lambs are somewhat similar gestationally to babies. It is intended to be a prototype. And of course, pro-lifers are like, well, this is awesome. Now, if you have a premature baby, then you can transfer them to the bio bag and then gestate them until, they are full term. But the reality is maybe that'll happen occasionally. But what's really going to happen is when you talk about the baby assembly process, which requires sperm, egg, and womb, sperm is very easy to access, right? All those Japanese men that you were talking about last night, they could give while they're at work, right? Eggs, female eggs are harder to access, but we've figured out a way to do it if a woman pumps herself full of enough hormones and then you laparoscopically extract them. Wombs are the hardest and most expensive part of the baby assembly process to procure. And that is why 25% of surrogates today that are renting their womb are in Ukraine, right? Because these are economically desperate women that will rent their bodies out because their husband is at the front lines or he's been killed and they have to support their 3 kids, right? This is why you've got countries across the world where brown bodies are giving birth to white babies, because those brown wombs are cheaper than the white wombs here in the United States. And it would be so much easier for big fertility to just cut out the female altogether in the womb process. So
there's a movie that I just watched, poorly executed, by the way, unfortunately.
Okay.
You may have seen it. I forgot what it was called, but it's about in the future they create pods where you can put the baby in it, and so career women, instead of actually having the baby, they go to work and there's a closet where they put the baby, the fake womb in the closet and close the door.
Sure.
Have you seen this?
No, but there was that video that made the rounds late last year called like Ectolife.
All those pods.
Right. All the pods. Right. And people
that.
are like, is this real? Is it happening? And the answer is no, not yet. But China is working on artificial womb technology. And here's where AI comes into the picture. They are working on AI nannies, robot nannies that are going to adjust the oxygen levels, the nutrition levels. They will be able to increase development or terminate development of the babies. And so this is really where the concern needs to be, is right now, very often, if a child is created through a surrogate and defective, maybe there's too many of them, maybe there's a developmental disability, oftentimes the actual real life woman is the only one, even though she's not genetically related, standing in the way between life and death for that kid. And we saw this with the situation, Brittany, I forget her last name, but the woman that was pregnant with a surrogate's baby, the 2 men, right, who she found out at week 23 that she had an aggressive cancer and she needed to start treatment immediately. And the 2 men said, terminate that baby. And she said, but it's unlikely, but I could deliver the baby. The baby could survive. And they said, we don't want a premature baby with all the medical conditions. And she said, okay, I will find people to adopt the baby so the baby doesn't have to die. And they said, we don't want our genetics out there. Kill the baby. And the baby is dead. The only person
they did kill it.
The baby is dead. She was opaque about whether or not it was an abortion or a delivery. She won't say. But that baby is dead.
I think we know. But
I think that we know. So what I'm saying is, do you understand what happens when you cut out the woman in the gestation process? It will be unlimited, free for all in terms of manufacturing, producing children.
Oh, that's not even half of it.
That's not the half of it.
CRISPR technology. You're gonna go to a designer baby factory as a single person and be like, I'd like a child who's strong, tall, with perfect teeth. And then they're gonna give you a list of genetic options, be like, how about this eye color? How about this eye color?
So that's already happening. You can already choose eye color, hair color of your children.
What? How? Where?
Because you can do genetic testing, right? At the moment that you conceive, you let the babies develop a little bit, and then you can test. And then you grade the embryos. You discard the ones you don't want.
Male, female is very easy.
Very easily, right? And so what's going on right now?
Female embryos weigh a little bit more.
It's a eugenics process. And that's why when you're talking about IVF, whether surrogacy or not, only 7% of babies created in a lab will be born alive. 7%. Because this is not about babies. This is about on-demand designer babies shipped worldwide. So here's the other problem with artificial wombs. And Jeff's told enough stories. I get to tell a story now.
Yeah.
Okay, so the story is I used to work for a Chinese adoption agency before I had kids. And I would accompany every now and then parents that were going to adopt their children. And so on my very, very first trip there, I went to a Chinese orphanage a couple different times, same orphanage. And I speak Chinese and I had been translating the medical reports and the schedules for these kids for a couple years. So I kind of thought that I knew how an orphanage ran. So I go into this room and it's probably 100 kids. It was the 3 to 6 month room. And so it was all the babies, 2 to 3 per crib, head to toe, swaddled really tight. And I go into this room of 100 children, infants at that point, and nobody was crying. And I was like, wow, what an impressive orphanage. They've got these babies on the schedule. They're all sleeping at the same time.
Purpose of swaddling.
This is amazing,
Yeah.
right? But then as I started to sort of wander the rows, I looked and the babies were awake and they were looking around, but they weren't making any noise. So I was like, well, interesting. So I scooped one up, and this is before I had children. But immediately there's something about women. You start to rock, you start to sway. I suddenly was like, oh my gosh, I'm singing. I didn't even realize I had started singing, but I'm singing to this baby. And at first she was just listless, like not looking at all. But after a little while, what women do, instinctively with babies is we look at them, they make a noise, we make the noise back, right? It's we simplify our language to their level. That's instinctually kind of how women communicate with babies. And within like 3 or 4 minutes, she was responding to me, like the eye contact. She was making facial expressions, right? She was lighting up. She was going, oh, babies at that age do this thing where they go, oh, oh, and you say, oh, oh, back to them. And you literally teach them how to talk. And it was just the sweetest thing. So after 5 minutes, I went, I'm going to put the baby down. I'm going to pick up another baby. And I set the baby down and the baby lost it.
Starts crying.
Just loses it, shrieking. And I grabbed that kid and I picked them up and I went, oh shit, these babies aren't crying because they've been trained to never cry.
Wow.
Right? It's not because they're on a schedule. It's because they have lost hope that anybody is ever going to respond to their cries.